very few black people coming into the institution. We're probably amongst the first people who made it into vets. And as I remember, my only interactions with people of different races was really when I went to visit my mother's employers. And my experience has always been, and I said to Ray yesterday, I will share a part of this because it is really a part of who I am and how I have gotten to where I am today. So as a child growing up, I've always been told that black is bad, white is great. I witnessed it, I observed it, I saw it, because every time I went to see my mom during vacations, she would be serving. And I'd be sitting there looking at all these people who my mother is working for, her friends who were also working around the street, also were black women working for white families. And that was my reality. I didn't know any better. So when I got into university, that was my reality, that was my point of reference. So even though I was a learner with other learners in the class, to me, because they were white, they were my superior. And that's how I related with them. I always thought of myself as an underdog. I always thought of myself as I can't be better than they are. They speak better, they know better. And remember, I've always grown to be told that you are a second-class citizen, you can't be better than them. And you carry that a lot where you are, whether you're a student, whether you're an employer or an employee, or you're an executive. However, where you find yourself playing in society, you carry that with you. And until you got to a point where you're fully self-aware, that can actually get you to a point where you feel less confident every time you walk into a room full of people of different color. So my first experience when I was at vets, I remember sitting in a lecture hall, so no point of reference, nobody telling me this is what you're going to expect. I was the first in my family to have gone through university. So I got into a class, it was a sociology class, and of course my experience of education has always been, you get a teacher sitting in front or standing in front of you, you guys are seated, and what they would do is they would ask you to turn to page 45 to go through a particular topic. And people were speaking, and I couldn't make sense of what was going on, because I had expected a teacher or a lecturer to tell me to page through so that I can get to, and I felt so lost because I couldn't relate with what was happening in that particular moment. And I realized that your experiences actually sometimes put you in a very different and maybe in a very not so privileged position, because there I am sitting waiting to write, everybody speaking, and 45 minutes later people picking up their bags and moving on to the next cycle of oppression. I knew that I needed to work twice as hard, so I put myself in a position where I really had to work twice as hard. By third year, I was saying to Ray, I became a tutor, and very strangely, I was a tutor of not just black students, but white students as well. and I was looking at it, and I'd look at myself and think, is this really happening? Am I a person that's tutoring on statistics, on psychology, and tutoring the very people that I got to realize, or I got to feel, were much superior than I am? And I think the component of race really has played a very important role in defining who I am. I'm raising this issue because when you get into the workplace, you don't leave that behind. It is a part of your identity. You come into a role, experienced, technically skilled and knowledgeable, but you still have, in a very subconscious way, something that keeps telling you that you cannot be better than they are. And whereas when you're an African woman, you also have battles with the gender issues, because we tend to undervalue who we are. And because we undervalue who we are, the way our posture in companies is always, we're very modest, we're very humble, we don't want to step on other people's toes. We want to, we don't want to identify ourselves as people with great potential. We want people to see us, because you think that by being out there, people might just think, this person thinks they actually know it all, when in fact they don't. So my own experiences in the workplace, and I'm very privileged to have worked in multiple roles, And I'll speak specifically about my role, not in Telkom, but my role in Old Mutual. So in Old Mutual, I was an executive. I actually sat in the Old Mutual Exco, which is an executive committee that oversees and makes decisions on behalf of the entire business. I was in Old Mutual South Africa, and Old Mutual South Africa back then was listed in New York, and we made 87% of our revenues in South Africa. And of course, it was one of our biggest businesses in the world. We existed in other emerging markets and globally, but the biggest core of Old Mutual resides in South Africa. So I was responsible for communications, corporate affairs, foundation, transformation, and that was what I knew. But when I came into the EXCO, I then had to switch to becoming a business leader. When you're a business leader, it's very different. You don't operate as a specialist. It's been a very big eye-opener because you assume, because you have a sense of identification, that you will find each other. We are very comfortable being the only women in the boardroom.
True.
And that's the experience, that's the reality. I thrive on being that woman. When I walk across, people say, oh, she's our EXCO member. And I try and hold on to that position because it gives me a sense of satisfaction to know that I'm the only one. And when an opportunity arises, we hardly ever try and pull other women up to come up with us. In fact, I have been in instances where I come to present and the people who will come down on me like a ton of bricks are not men, they are women. Women who want to use my story to outshine me and probably outshine other women. And you then want to understand, what is it about women that makes us each other's worst enemies? And I don't have the answer to that, but I do know that we hardly ever find women supporting other women. It's a phenomenon you will find everywhere, and it doesn't matter what industry you are in. Women are each other's worst enemies. And I have, as a result, taken it upon myself to, at the very least, display a sense of care and be able to avail myself to other women, because I know how it is to be a woman who is aspiring when the world is isolating and there's nobody else to hold your hand. And that's why when Ray said I mentor, I'm very deliberate about making sure that other women who have similar aspirations are handheld by me. Of course, I can't hold other women in my workplace, but the very least that I can do is those that are within my reach, I'm able to influence in ways that I know I would have wanted other people to influence me. I think, maybe just to conclude, as I said to you earlier, that we mirror in corporates what we see in society.
Yes.
I think, for me, key things I want to conclude with is we make a choice as women as to how we want to be defined. And for me, there are just two very clear choices. You can choose to be defined by society and its complexities as a woman, or you can choose to define yourself and push the boundaries and not want to be defined according to all these confines that are created by society. I have chosen to define myself according to my own standards. It's not an easy journey. Sometimes you push against the wall, but you really get to a point where when you are comfortable with who you are, there is nothing else that matters. And people ask, but how do you get to develop that level of self-awareness? I think it's not an easy journey. It is a journey that requires you to dedicate time to spend with yourself. We hardly ever make time to be with yourselves. We spend a lot of time, and of course it's nice to be on social media, it's nice to be on your phone, it's nice to have family and friends, but you do need to dedicate a particular amount of time in a day to yourself. Try and listen to your thoughts. Try and figure out where you are. Try and figure out where you want to be, because it is in that process of reflection that you will discover the inner being that sits in you that you're suppressing because you're just not letting a moment to be with yourself and discovering that person. I read a book, and I don't remember remember the exact title, but I remember the contents, and it was part of the many books I read when I was doing my MBA. In fact, if you do decide in the future to do your MBA, I would encourage you to do it with vets, because I'm not getting paid for it. But I must tell you that when you think about education, the emphasis is always on the technical skills. Your finance, your marketing, your operations. We rarely focus on the softer part of the skills that leaders actually do require. Through my MBA studies, I learned of a framework called the head, the heart, and the hands. It was a very, very insightful framework that wherever I try and look at where I want to go, I always look at those 3 ages because they shape how I think about myself. In summary, the head talks to the technical skills that you require to be able to be effective in the job that you do. The head, the heart, which is one of the most difficult things, is your ability to look within and be able to connect and inspire other people. It sounds like the easiest of them all, but it's actually the hardest of them all. And I'm sure you would know that when you think about people's skills, it's not always common that the greatest of leaders technically have the right heart in terms of how they lead and how they inspire. People tend to overvalue themselves. They think very highly of themselves. I'm sure you've worked under such people. I'm sure you've dated people who overvalue themselves. I'm sure you've interacted with those kind of people. I think for me, the heart has always been a bit of a challenge because it is at that point in time when we're asked to do a very deep reflection of who we are and who we want to be that I've had to connect with myself. And I think it is at that point that I realized where my strengths lie, who I am, and all the other things that I actually took for granted. So I guess what I'm saying, and the hands of course is just the stuff that you do. I guess what I'm saying, in trying to define the person that you want to be, in trying to live the greatest life that you want to live, you don't always have to focus on growing yourself at the level of the head, which is the technical. Invest a lot of time introspecting, finding yourself, defining yourself, and being who you are. Because corporates are so challenging. You need to be who you are. You need to stay in your authenticity. You need to know what boundaries you're not prepared to push. You need to know what lines you're not prepared to push. Because everybody wants to be in the front line. If you know who you are content with who you are, and you know how, and the things that you're not prepared to change, and you are very clear on your journey and your destination. In my view, you are halfway through your road to success. So I think as I conclude, and as I know I've said I'm concluding, I think self-awareness has been one of those that have really carried me through this very difficult journey. I am always aware of who I am in situations. I'm always aware of how I impact other people, and I'm always aware of the things that I'm not perfect in, that I'm able to accept that this is me. And even when I'm not able to do things, I'm comfortable because this is who I am. So I hope that in the journey, in my own sharing of my journey, in sharing of her journey, you will do your own discovery. You will invest a lot of time in thinking about the person that you are and how you want your story to be.